And I'll leave you the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Isabel. And can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Well, very warm welcome to all, and I think it's a great pleasure to really introduce this what I believe will be the first of a longer series of dedicated workshop in the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, and I think it gives me great pleasure to because this is how we see the continuation of the retailers, and when I say retailers, I mean, of course, retailers and wholesalers' engagement in sustainability, and of course, this is very timely and very important when we see that part of the recovery from the COVID crisis will be the green and the digital transformation of the European economy. So these two fundamental legs of the whole recovery program is also how we can all work together towards making this Green Deal a reality. And we all know that within that there's quite a number of sub-strategies from chemicals to farm to fork, but there's also, of course, the circular economy strategy, which is a very important one. And it's important for those of you that joining us a little bit from from new that we actually remind everyone that we're actually building upon the foundations of 10 years of the REAP program and the Retail Forum on Sustainability, which was established more than 10 years ago now as a partnership between the European Commission and the retail sector to really highlight having a real dialogue on some of the solutions, but also some of the challenges in moving towards sustainability options and moving towards sustainable production and consumption, and on all kinds of aspects where you deal with reducing CO2 emission, reducing resources use, and of course most notably moving towards a more circular economy. And what we have agreed with the European Commission is to have really, and this is of course very broad, the number of sectors are involved, and I think the Commission was very much not to try to have a sector approach, but to try to look at circular economy in a very broader sense, involving a number of participants, and we very much supported that, but we nevertheless wanted to make sure that the legacy of the Retail Forum was not lost, and therefore we have committed to organized at least twice a year some dedicated workshop, and this is very much the first of them. We all, of course, would prefer to meet face to face, but I have to say that every cloud has its silver lining, as they say in English, and you can also look at the glass half full rather than the glass half empty. And when you look at participants list, we have now 108 people. Now I do not recall, or it was a long time ago, that we had 108 participants at one of the last meetings of the Retail Forum. So I think this new technology enable people also that are based in Stockholm or in Helsinki or in Lisbon or in Athens to basically attend those meetings and those workshops as well. So I think there is also some positive aspect to it, and also because there is a new beginning, if you like, of the commitment of the retail sector into this area, that there is a very broad participants, of course, not only from the retail wholesale sector, not only from the members of Eurocommerce, but more broadly other retail and wholesale companies, but also I see recognize some names, also people from a number of other sectors, and of course most notably packaging, which is an important topic that we'll discuss today within the double context of the implementation of the single-use plastics directive, ongoing, or the current revision of the packaging and packaging waste directives. And I mean, it gives me great pleasure to come back to a topic that before joining Eurocommerce 9 years ago, I was very much the focus of my work when I was the head of ACE. And I think to look at how the various actors can actually work, as Isabel mentioned, towards the applying the waste hierarchy, very much the sort of the reuse, reduce, and recycling of the packaging, and whilst recognizing the value of that the packaging can play from an economic and marketing point of view, but also from a food safety or other logistics efficiency and environmental advantages as well. So this workshop today will be very much an opportunity, and when I look at the program, and I want to thank them all the speakers that have committed to come and present their options and their solution here today, and will then be a basis for trying to see how we've made progress over the past years and what are also some of the challenges that then the policymakers can help resolve. And I'll stop there, and hopefully Mattia is there and can say his words of introduction. And I do recall Mattia from a while ago, I think in his other incarnation.
Mattia, the floor is yours.
Yes, good afternoon, and now you should be able to see me. So first of all, I do apologize, but I had 3 sets of problems. One that normally is a day out for me, so I've accepted to do it also. Normally I'm not in Brussels today, and I was coming back from a visit of my mom. So I was slightly late. Then when I came, there was a connection issues, and then thirdly, the link was the wrong link. So I think if you can accumulate all the wrong things, but there is no fault on your side, and indeed, thank you very much for the invitation. Indeed, the reform of the packaging directive is one of the, let's say, major legislative revision which is foreseen in the Circular Economy Action Plan, which was adopted on the 11th of March of this year. And it will be very important to get the contribution of retailers like you and all the sector, because indeed the retailing sector is one of the most important sectors from the packaging point of view. So indeed, we have a clear mandate, which I will try to explain to you. But at the same time, to assess all the options of this mandate which are given, we will have to, let's say, get your advice and input. Indeed, also, I think it's important that we are in the middle of the stakeholder consultation, which has been launched. So I really invite all of you to participate to the usual stakeholder consultation, because as you know, the stakeholder consultation will be the basis for the impact assessment that the Commission will carry out the option. I also see that Eunomia, which is our advisor for the impact assessment of the packaging waste directive, is also here today. So I think that's it will be very important. Indeed, as I said, association Christian like Eurocom will play an important role in indicating to us also what are the likely impacts of the different options. Now, if I move, let's say, if we take, let's do it like an impact assessment. So the first one is the problem definition when you do an impact assessment. So indeed, what we have seen over time is a number of trends. One is the increased amount of packaging. When I say increased amount of packaging, this is also related, regardless of the fact that the packaging is becoming lighter and lighter, in terms of quantities is still increasing. So actually this is an element which is a bit worrying. It's linked also to the, of course, overall growth. The fact that there is a development, also economic development in a number of continents, but indeed also in Europe we have seen an increased amount of packaging. And also, this is something which you can find also in the Green Deal and in the Circular Economy Action Plan. There is a reference to overpackaging. So sometimes, it's always difficult to define what is exactly is overpackaging, but indeed sometimes there has been some packaging which is not strictly necessary to what you need to package a certain product. So that's is another trend which has been seen into the market. And of course, also another trend which has been seen is that not packaging is reusable and recyclable. So that's indeed is another, if you would describe a problem definition, is another trend which is in the market. There is lots of packaging which is either recyclable or reusable, but there is also still a number of packaging that is not recyclable or reusable. So to tackle all of this and to make it more circular, the mandate we have received is pretty clear. The first thing is to look at the essential requirements of the directive to see how this can be designed in a stricter way, which will make sure that all packaging by 2030, which will be placed into the market, is recyclable or reusable. Secondly, we are also being asked to be seen that considering that for certain type of packaging, and I forgot to mention that in the problem definition, because of course each measure has to be linked to a problem or a specific sub-problem. For some of the materials, there is not enough circularity. I mean, here, I mean, I have all my old knowledge of DG Grow, having been in charge of the raw materials and the energy-intensive industry. So I've been dealing with all the type of materials that you find in packaging, notably glass, metals. For this type of materials, I mean, the market is pretty circular. I mean, the recycling rates are high, often above paper as well, above 80%, and sometimes almost to 90%. But for example, we know that plastic in particular, recycling rates remains rather low. So there is not what we call normally sometimes a market failure. So there also the mandate we have received is pretty clear, is to look into a recycled content option for packaging. It's not a novelty because you may be aware that already in the SUP directive, in the single-use plastic directive, there is a recycled content obligation for beverage bottles of 30%. So that's is a bit the first time that this was done. And by the way, the feedback we have received from recyclers is pretty positive. They've indicated to us that a recycled content obligation have had a positive impact on the price of secondary raw materials, and indeed they've made much more attractive to recycle plastics. So that's is data we have received from EURIC, and this is interesting because, as you may be aware, also the single-use plastic directive is not yet entered into force. It will enter into force in July of 2021. So actually, only the obligation, not even the entry into force, but just the fact that there is an obligation in the directive has produced a clear impact on the market. So this is another important point. So recycled content obligation. Then we are going also to look at the issue of public procurement. As you know, in the Circular Economy Action Plan, it is clearly mentioned that in all the sectorial revision that the Commission will carry out, and packaging is one of the sectorial revision, we will be we are going to look in how to make mandatory green public procurements. So we are doing this already. To give you an example, and now with the batteries directive, which also our unit is in charge, which the new legislative proposal will come out in a few weeks' time. But we're going to do also this for packaging. Of course, I mean, we've been looking also already with our consultant, Nomia. I mean, we have to do it where it makes sense. So a clear candidate where public authorities are spending money, which relates also to packaging, so where there could be benefits if you make a mandatory green public procurement as obligatory, that will be the area of catering services, where indeed there is a lot of packaging related to catering services. Then, as I said, recycled content, green public procurement, essential requirements. Of course, when we are going to look at essential requirements, this may also lead, and this is also in the language of the Circular Economy Action Plan, that we may phase out some packaging which are there in the market, which are clearly not recyclable, not reusable. So this may also lead not only to strengthening essential requirements, to finding out some type of packaging with of course, in doing all of that, and we even had recently a meeting with our colleagues in the G-Santé, of course, it's always important to ensure the link between the revision of the packaging and packaging waste directive and the food contact materials regulation. Of course, I mean, in no way, whatever we do from an environmental point of view should have a negative impact on the side of the health for consumer when they eat food. So this is in particular, of course, for food packaging. But indeed, we will be working closely with our colleagues in DG Santé to ensure that there is the right link. Finally, of course, the idea is also to, and this is a bit an idea that we have also for batteries, for end-of-life vehicles, for the ROS directive, is to align, let's say, the provisions in terms of restriction of substances to reach, but more importantly than to reach, I would say to make sure that the authority which is in charge to carry out this restriction will be ECHA, so the European Chemical Agency. Of course, we will have to establish in the new directive or maybe regulation, because as you know, for example, for batteries, we have moved from a directive into a regulation. I don't exclude to do that we will do the same for the packaging and packaging waste directive. By the way, I know that normally industry is always in favor of a shift from directive to regulation, because that will create a legal certainty and also harmonize the internal market. This is a bit what we're going to do. So another area, as I said, it could be some restriction on certain type of packaging. And as I told you, I mean, now is really the moment to participate to the stakeholder consultation, to engage also with Enomi, our consultant, and then, of course, all the input that we will receive from stakeholders will be used to prepare the impact assessment. Now, if I conclude with the timing, normally, as you know, is in the annex of the Circular Economy Action Plan, the adoption of the packaging and packaging waste that foreseen by the year 2021. Normally, we should be able to keep that deadline. Most likely will be in Q4 of 2021. So towards the end of 2021, the proposal will be finally adopted, because as you know, also the internal procedure with an impact assessment takes time in terms of approval by the regulatory scrutiny board. Not always, I mean, we do hope to get a positive opinion, but as you know, more than half of the submission to the regulatory scrutiny board, they get a negative opinion. And by the way, we got it also on packaging, on batteries, which was a very high level political priorities, but this did not prevent the regulatory scrutiny board to issue a negative opinion in July. So I'm not saying that I expect a negative opinion on the packaging and packaging waste directive revision, but indeed, in any case, even in case of a positive opinion, normally there is a lot of adjustment that needs to be done on the impact assessment before then we start to do the legal drafting for the proposal. So this is where we are at the moment. As I said, please contribute to the stakeholder consultation, and I remain available for any question, but also Maya, my colleague, she's also online, and she's the leading person on the revision of the packaging and packaging waste directive. So I'm sure that she will also be happy to reply to any question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pellegrini. I think, well, I mean, as your comers, we will definitely reply and contribute. And also this workshop will also be a step towards promoting better recycling of packaging. As a result of the workshop, we will publish also kind of a toolbox on how we perceive packaging could contribute to the circular economy. So that's everything is being done in parallel. In order to get a bit more of a background, may I just invite Amy Nicholas from Enomia to present the progress on the impact assessment of the packaging and packaging waste directive. If Amy can just, hello, put your camera on and just share your screen so you can get your presentation on, if it's okay.
Yep. Hi, everybody. It should be sharing now.
It is.
Yep. Okay, so thank you for that introduction. So this is to show some of the progress that's been made. So you know me working with some other consultancies to do. So I just thought I'd run through quickly the approach that we've taken. If I can, do I have permission to move the slides forward? I can't seem to move them.
You should be able to.
Oh, okay. I think it's working now. Sorry. Okay, so this is just an overview of how the project's all going to work together. So we've had the inception phase. We've been looking at the problem definitions of different aspects of the project. We will then be developing a business as usual scenario and a baseline to look at things if there weren't any measures put in place for change. We will be developing those measures into a group of options, and those will be taken forward to do an impact assessment with. During these first stages, we've already had a bit of consultation, which I'll take you through in a moment, but there'll be plenty of opportunities for input. We will then be looking at a comparison of the different options against one another and presenting the results. That will then go through to the regulatory scrutiny board. As you can see on the right-hand side here, task 7 of the packaging and packaging waste impact assessment is a lot of the stakeholder consultation opportunities. So in terms of the progress, we have done the problem definitions for essential requirements for waste prevention, lightweighting and reuse. And we've now started to explore the recycled content problem definition as well. We've already completed the baseline for the business as usual scenario, and that will be iterated as we go through the project. We have now got a list of preliminary measures which have been identified as a result of some of the work that's already been done and some of the stakeholder engagement work. And the assessment of the impacts has already begun. We've done this a long list of measures based on a comprehensive literature review and some initial interviews with stakeholders, which some of you might have taken part in. We have scoped the specific measures in a sense that we've been looking at what's going to be included in those measures. So what kind of materials, is it glass, paper, card? What kind of polymer might be involved if it's a plastic, for example. So that every single measure that we include will be going through a process of scoping what kind of materials or polymers or products it's relevant for. We've done an initial feasibility selection on that long list to make sure it's applicable to the EU implementation and to rule out any infeasible measures. We've then got measures and to make sure it's relevant to EU context and it is effective in actually reducing the problem drivers. We will then be meeting with the Commission to discuss that and finalise that shortlist in the end. So what we've decided to do is to take all of the different content of the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, all of the many complex issues, and hone that into a selection of 8 themes. And those themes are what will be going forward through the impact assessment process. So we've got lightweighting, reusable packaging systems, recyclable packaging and any change in design or system for that, recycled content, compostable packaging, e-commerce, and hazardousness and enforcement of measures that are already in place or might be in the future. And then we've also introduced later into the project, as well as recycled content, which came online a bit later, is green public procurement. And this is a cross-cutting theme, which helps us to deliver some of the other measures, basically. So how we're going to be looking at the cost-benefit analysis part of this process is we're going to be looking at both historic data and future projections. We're going to be looking, that then goes through a mass flow module part of the model. We'll be looking at the controls, the measures and the options. We then be going through the impact calculations and we'll be looking at unit impact, so the cost and benefits side of things. And then you get your model outputs all together. So the different elements of it, we'll be looking at what is placed on the market. So is it reusable, is it single use? The supply chain that goes through, through the retail and wholesale. And then the use phase, how is it used? Is it reused or is it not? Then what happens when it goes to waste? How is it collected? Does it end up in littering? What kind of sorting and reprocessing takes place? And what remains in the environment? So these are all the elements that we're going to be looking at for the assessment of impacts. So in terms of what we've already done for the progress on stakeholder consultation, We've had the Inception Impact Assessment feedback, so thank you very much for everybody who sent that in. We've had a member state survey, we've had some very good responses for. That's now closed and we've been collating that information. We already had one of our first series of workshops back in May. Now, because these workshops tend to be online, to make them interactive as possible, we're trying to keep them quite small. So we had to do a series of workshops because there was quite a lot of interest in that one. And we had some introductory webinars. We have now opened the online public consultation, which will be open until the beginning of January. So forward looking, we've got on the 10th of November, the first recycled content online workshop, which some of you have already been invited to. Not every single invite has gone out yet, so apologies if you haven't quite received yours. But those have mostly gone out. And then the remaining workshops we haven't finalised the date for yet, will be coming up likely in January. So those will be on green public procurement, on recycled content, on reuse systems, e-commerce packaging, recyclability, including the definition and approaches to plastic films and composites, compostable packaging, and then optimizing the amount of material used in product packaging. Alongside this in November, we will start on one-to-one stakeholder interviews. And in order to find out what people are really interested in, we will be sending around a survey so that you can let us know what different topics will be most appropriate for your organisation in terms of us speaking to you. So do look out for that in the near future. So hopefully that is a very quick overview of where we've got to so far. If you have any questions, please email ppwd_ia@eunomia.co.uk. If you have any other questions, if you want to submit a response because you haven't been able to take part in a workshop or get a survey sent in your results as quickly as before the deadline. And yeah, I think that's everything. That was useful.
Thank you very much, Amy. Greatly appreciate it. I think that, can you hear me properly? Yes. So the view of the introduction wouldn't be complete if we didn't get some consumers insight. And this is where I leave the floor to Michael Coon from the Executive Director of the Collaborating Center on Sustainable Consumption and Production. Michael, this is your time.
Super, thank you very much. And I hope the presentation you can already see, right? Perfect. So yeah, just a warm welcome also from my side as a coordination group member of the CE stakeholder platform. And within the coordination group, we often look, and I think that's also on the discussion or on the agenda today, on the design of products and services, but also on packaging. And of course, it was already expressed by Christopher and Mattia as well. It's a complex process. You need to look into many different variables, like efficient filling, the whole safe and efficiency perspective, the lightweight perspective. Still, in the sales aspect, it needs to be appealing, but it needs to also be the right information on it. It needs to be convenient. And then if you go more into the end of cycle discussion, of course, ideally for consumer, it's also easy to separate and sort and dispose of. And somehow it needs also to be compatible with the local recycling infrastructure, because otherwise you don't make the deal, so to say. So having said all this, of course, you can consider something truly circular if you have all those aspects in mind. And then you might ask, but who's now in the driving seat doing all this? Of course, on one side, the consumer probably will say, hey, it's the manufacturers, it's the retailer, they are responsible for sustainable packaging, and our influence is very limited on it. But they also will say, we buy more products than packaging. On the other side, the retailer side or the manufacturing side might say, our supply depends really on shopper demands and sales, and we need circular packaging that sells. So the question is, how do you bridge all those different components? And let me just see, because yeah, now it's working again. So how do you develop packaging that really sufficiently meets all those different requirements, which I have expressed before, you have expressed before as well? And how to make circular packaging more attractive? Because if it's maybe cumbersome for the consumer to be engaged in, I'm not sure if he will take it. but maybe he will if he understands the value of it. How to establish a reusable packaging system, that's maybe a bit more challenging on the forefront than just making something more recyclable, but maybe it also has the higher impact measurement. And how to guide consumer to better separate and sort waste correctly if we cannot come up, for example, with a reusable system. Of course, if we say so, we also really need to consider what are the insights we need to have from consumers. And on the one side, of course, we might listen to them just doing surveys, but as you know, usually there's a different take on what I say and what I do. So do we really understand how consumers tick? And do we really understand that they are not always the rational, but sometimes they also do really irrational stuff? And how do we work with this? In order to get more insights into it, we actually have created a consumer insight action panel, which is a contribution to the stakeholder platform. And not only into plastics and packaging, we look also into electronics and textiles. We want to really work with the consumer, almost co-create, understand the consumer, understand what he or she might be up to, and drive some solution forward. We also are keen actually to go and understand how can we make circularity more easy to understand, feel more normal, fun and relevant, and how can we change the language around it so that the consumer are really engaging. And are there already existing values out there among the consumers which we can tap into? In order to say so, of course, we need to, again, place the consumer in the whole value chain and need to understand, yeah, the consumer is interacting with retailer on the one side, but also with the local waste treatment system. So let's talk to both, but also let's bring in the whole value chain really to create new packaging maybe solution, but also to test interventions for consumer activation in the end of the day. And we have started with the German market, and we have brought a number of retailer and other organizations together, civil society organization, research, but also waste authorities to test, to discuss among the whole value chain which options are actually doable, what works with the consumer, what works for also the waste authority system or the waste treatment system. In order not just to look into studies, we really went out there to local waste treatment sites and we separated waste ourselves with a number of retailers together and a number of other stakeholders, really to find out where we are at the moment in, for example, separating and sorting packaging, because you can create a lot of design issues and a lot of interesting ideas along the value chain. If you don't get the consumer to do it rightly, it might be very difficult. So far, what we find is the consumer awareness for why should I actually remove the lid and the sealing foil is still very low. And many consumers still find it quite hard to engage there, especially if it's complex packaging. So if there are many layers to separate, for example, or several layers to separate. Also, if, for example, the yogurt cup is relatively small, they might not engage so much as with large yogurt cups, because there they find it's very visible, maybe the separation marks in comparison to the smaller yogurt cups, and somehow they engage. But often we also find that the paper banderole around those yogurt cups is actually not removed. And sleeves around plastic bottles are equally not removed. However, again, on the other side, if the packaging is large, so if you have, for example, large hygiene or detergent bottles, they are usually sorted quite correctly because the consumer feels, hey, there's a value attached to it. It's quite a large packaging. And this one, I'm also spending time on to separate and engage into sorting it more rightly. So what are first takeaways which we find so far? I think, well, probably if we offer different choices to consumer, we really also need to see that we don't offer something which might be confusing. So what we found, laminated paper for food products, which really look like they can be separated, but in the end, they cannot be, for example, the paper cannot be put into the paper bin. It really confuses consumer. So probably we need to look with all joint forces on what works and what didn't work. So we would suggest new partnerships also with the waste management authorities to see really, as I just did, how consumers are sorting and how can we design a packaging that works for consumers. Similar, we could engage also other stakeholders. Of course, we understand there are a lot of different product groups, and probably for each product group, almost you need your own packaging strategy. And your own consumer engagement strategy. So probably we need to share all those good examples and also the examples which didn't work. So probably there is more appetite for a learning platform on the European stakeholder platform to just share those knowledge. But also, of course, looking into circularity and packaging helps very much implementing the Green Deal. And probably we need more speeding up the piloting and the collaboration around packaging than what's out there so far. Last slides, and maybe just coming back actually to the starting point of the presentation where I talked about design. So probably we are just in a time-wise area or arena where we can say probably the main priority of packaging was sales promotion in the past with all the additional criteria. But maybe we need some rethinking about making the most sustainable circular packaging successful, as we have just seen throughout the presentation. And I'm looking forward to many good examples today as well coming from the retailer side and probably the starting of sharing good experience around different sectors and different retail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I think it's a nice transition towards the first session.